Hello, SALTWATER Nation. Joe Simons like diamonds back again. Luke Simons like diamonds. What's up, brother?
I'm ready to talk about some hacks that are going to save listeners lots of money.
That's it. 5 saltwater fishing hacks that will save you money. We all love hacks. We all love shortcuts. We all love finding things that will save us money, especially in this crazy inflationary period right now. Man, filled up the boat this weekend, and that one hurt. That was painful.
Yeah, it's packing a punch.
Jeez.
So everything we can do just to save anything, it helps out. And some of these will actually save quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially when we get into one that it's going to be contentious. I'm sure that we've mentioned it a time or two in the past. There's always some contention, but we're going to go right into it.
Well, let's start with one that's not contentious that we've done a couple of videos on, but still we see people mess this up. And it is re-spooling, and braid in particular, because braid gets pretty doggone expensive, especially you start using that nice Power Pro and dial with J braids. And a lot of people make the mistake of re-spooling the, let's just say 300 yards, right? They put the whole 300 yards, or maybe they can only hold 200 and they waste 100 and doggone. And we've all done it. Like we've all like, oh man, we got to get every little last ounce and we got to get it from start to finish. No, that's not the way to do it. In fact, I mean, Luke's been doing this for years, so have I, and not once does it cause a problem. And that's just having the top 150, and you could mark it off exactly. The top 150 yards is new, or the stuff you replace. Everything else under that is just the original. Like you should never ever have to replace it, really, for the life of your reel if you don't want to. So talk about the story and how do you measure off that 150? What's your secret?
Yeah, and so every reel is a little bit different, but what we found for spinning tackle in particular, especially for inshore saltwater flats where we're fishing a lot of shallow water, the fish are spooky, so you have to have very long casts to have a good shot at catching them. So light, thin braid on a relatively small spinning reel is the best combination. It really is tough to beat. I used to be a bait caster. I thought spinning reels were for newbies and chumps, and then finally started getting outfished by some buddies who made the transition to braid, and I finally made the switch, and now I that's all I use. But braid is just more expensive than many other lines, especially when you measure by the diameter. It's so thin, but it's very strong, and so to save money and on braid on line in general, even for a 2500 size reel, I will load the bottom part of it with mono. And what I do is I load it up, regardless if it's a 2500 or a 3000. If it's like a 2500, 3000 reel, I'll load up with mono until I get about 1/4 of an inch in between the top of the spool, like the rim of the spool, and the outer edge of the line. And at that point, for most reels in the 2500 to 3000 range, again, everyone's a little bit different. The diameter's a little bit different, but in general, if you get started about 1/4 of an inch, that's going to get about 100 to 150 yards of 10-pound braid, right? If you're using 15-pound braid, you have to do a little bit more than 1/4 inch. If you're using 20-pound braid, which I don't recommend because you can't cast nearly as far, you'll need to go down a little bit more as well. So that's kind of like the guesstimate, if you will. And then after you've done it with whatever your favorite reel is, right after you've done it, say you started 1/4 inch and you didn't use as much as you thought, right? Then just make the slight alterations and you'll have it dialed in. So that's the premise. And the cool thing when you do that bottom monofilament, mono is so inexpensive, especially when you rate it by diameter. So you can fill the bottom part of the spool, which rarely ever sees the light of day, with much less expensive line. You have the more expensive yet better braid on the top. And then when you change it later, I try to measure at least 100 yards, right? 100 yards or 150 yards. That way on all future respools, I can get exactly 100 yards or 150 yards. And the easiest way to do that is just load up, whatever it takes, say it's 150 yards, go to a field and literally walk out 100 yards of it, cut it, do a line to line knot, and that's your 100-yard mark, right? So then on your future respool, just tie off right there at that knot, and you'll get exactly 100 yards. That way you can go buy a 300-yard spool of braid and you'll get exactly 3 respools out of that braid. That's the most cost-effective way to do it.
Yep. Yeah. So once again, 300 yards of 10-pound braid, it can last now 3 times longer than what most people are doing. And, you know, we did a video a while back. Luke used, in this example, mono for the majority of it. He also had one where it's just a normal mono, quick little backing, and then braid all the way throughout. But still, that bottom part of the braid is basically just fresh braid that really never gets used. So that's why the next level is like, all right, if this is never going to get used, why not just stick with mono in general? So let's talk about objections to this, right? Because some people say, well, man, what if I end up, you know, catching a really monster fish and it's taking 200 and something yards out, and you know, now you have a knot there that's weak. Talk about some of the other objections, like why doesn't everyone do this?
Yeah, I mean, they just don't trust their knots. I think that's the reason, right? Because hooking into a big tarpon or something where it will actually, that's one of the, you know, it's not many fish can run 100 yards of line out, or especially 150. And that's a lot of line. That's an entire football field at the 100, and 150 is 1.5 football fields. Like a redfish and a snook, no matter what size, like in the flats without like crazy current flow, it's not going to run 100 yards of line. It might feel like it. Like I've had many where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 100 yards out, and it'll jump and it's like 50 yards out, right?
I had that one with Deeks, because Deeks marks his. Some people will mark them with, you know, markers. And it was that monster trout, and it was super light tackle. And I was like, man, this thing is like 200 yards out. And he's like, do you see that? He's like, that's 80 yards. And I was like, what? And you could see it. You could see it making splashes. Like it felt like it was a mile away, and it was 80 yards exactly. So 150, dude, that's a long, long ways away.
Yeah, and no trout is even like, that was a giant trout. Like trout was barely, even if a trout is a drag puller, it's a good one. But and so another way to even take it another step further, and I used to do this as well, is I would have a reel that had enough backing to cover 75 yards of line. And although that is short, I've only had a handful of times when the knot will go through the guides, and it's always tarpon, but I've never had a break. So just know that the proper tension of your drag setting should be about 2 to 3%, or sorry, 20 to 30% of your weakest line strength. So in this case, it'll be a 10-pound braid. So you only need about 3 pounds of drag. And the reason why is because the drag here is going to be 3 pounds, but what that fish feels after dragging all of that line through the water, let's say it rips out 100 yards of line, that's a lot of line out in the water. It's a lot of water drag that is combining with the reel's drag to have pressure on the fish. So that hook, the knot right at the hook, or your line to line knot, that is having way more force than what this little line to line knot is going to have when it's 100 yards away. So just keep that in mind. I just do a double uni for my line to lines. If I'm doing braid to braid, it's a 10 turns each one. And that is a super strong knot. It's not going to break. It's shocking how strong it is. But what I was saying too, as far as getting even more money for your buck, is you can have one reel with say 100 yards of backing, right, to enable 100 yards of braid, and another one with 75 yards. And once that 100-yard one starts whittling down, right, based on normal usage, then you can put it on your other reel and just load it up backwards, right, where you do your reel that is set up for a little bit less braid, and then you can reel off the older line on your other reel, and then the used line will be on the bottom next to the mono, which will rarely ever see the light of day. And then the top part is totally untouched braid. So you can basically get 2 times the money on every single spool of line. So that's how you can really maximize the savings you get online. Because although braid is more expensive on a per yard basis, we all know that, it lasts way longer. So if you just do one of these 2 tips, you'll definitely save money over the years online, just because of how long it lasts. So although it is a little bit of more of upfront cost, it'll definitely save money in the long run.
Yep, love it. And to clarify on my story, I didn't have a trout, even though it was close to 30 inches. It did not actually take out 80 yards. We were fishing in Fort Pierce with live bait and letting our baits go out 50, 60 yards to the honey hole, and then it started taking line out. Just so if people are like, how the heck did a trout take 80 yards out? But it was, remember, it hit 50, 60 yards out and then started taking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And you always want to freak out and think it's a mile out. And it was pretty embarrassing when he's like, that mark right there is 80. You're not even close. I'm like, I'm getting spooled. Cool. So that's number 1. Number 2, and this is something that we made the mistake when we first started using soft plastic lures. We're live bait guys, like a lot of people in Florida. It's one of the biggest misconceptions out there. I don't know how it happened. I mean, it's so ironic that, bass guys here in Florida and the highest paid anglers in the whole state are, for the most part, bass guys, with the exception of some a couple of tournaments for like marlin and stuff. But even then, a lot of them are using lures and plugs and trolling. So long story short, we go from live bait to lures, and we think immediately, because we heard about paddle tails or swim baits that were just kind of an easy, great starting bait, and we lose the tail and be like, oh man, and we just toss it. Not in the water, obviously. We toss it in the trash, put it in our pocket. And then all of a sudden we started realizing, wait a minute, like with a lot of these lures, once they lose the tail, that looks like a little jerk shad. In fact, you can toss it, you can cast the thing a whole lot further, and it's highly productive, and not just on paddle tails, and even on our shrimp, on our new Power Prawn USA. An amazing way to catch fish is without the tail. You've kind of termed it what, the Nub Rig?
The Nub Rig, yeah. And so here's the paddle tail with the tail. Just for those watching, it's just a normal paddle tail. As long as they just need to be, not all of them can do this. They need to have like a torpedo shaped head to work as a Nub Rig for a weedless soft plastic.
Yep.
And so what this is the same thing, just without the tail. So it's basically the same lure, tail's gone. And I've caught some upper slot, even over slot redfish with this little Nub Rig on the weedless hook. It does a really good job of mimicking small bait fish. So when a lot of fry bait is in the area, this little Nub Rig will outfish the full paddle tail, just because the size is more in line with what those fish are really dialed into. And so in many cases, I'll now purposely tear off the tail to get this little nub section, and then use it when the bait are real small. So again, what Joe was saying, for many years, like a puffer fish, which I totally can't stand puffer fish, they will just wear through any soft plastic, no matter how strong it is. And I used to think, oh man, that puffer just got the tail, it's ruined, I got to throw it away. And now I'm like literally purposely tearing off the tail myself when situations arise. So now when I do have a puffer attack, as Joe mentioned, instead of throwing away, it now goes in my tackle bag, so that I'm now ready for when the small bait is showing up in a certain spot. So
yep, and it's true. Big baits rock, but elephants do eat peanuts. And some of these big snook, big reds, even big flounder will crush that thing popping off the bottom. And certainly trout. We've got a couple of pretty cool underwater videos, showing big trout nailing that little nub. And and not only can you get a little bit more money out of each lure, which is why this is a money saving hack, you can get a lot more. Like once that nub is there, like it takes a long time for that sucker to get destroyed. Remember, we've had days where, catch 20, 30 fish on one little nub before you finally have to, kind of put it down to rest.
Yeah, we had that podcast, and it was a live podcast on the water. And we got to this trout hole, and there was, I don't know how many we caught on there. I had 10 casts in a row that was a trout, and it was on this exact lure. It started out with a tail, eventually the tail was gone. But another tip too, in many cases, if you're using jig heads especially, is eventually, like if you get pantsed, it's when a fish grabs the lure and basically rips the tail down. It's called pants. And what happens is it'll eventually start ripping up the material, and it'll be the material at the tip of the bait, right? The tip of the lure. It's usually going to be about maybe a half inch, a little bit more in between a quarter inch and half inch. What you can do is, again, many places you get pantsed a few times, and as you're casting, the lure is going to pants itself. And all you have to do is just tear off the tip of the lure, and now you can rig it up again and have those keepers in some solid plastic. So this is just, again, this is a lure that was all jacked up from getting ripped apart. And now I can just rig it up there. And now we have a solid jig that's ready to go, right?
Bonus hack.
Yeah, ready to go. And there's more. Wait, there's more.
Whoa. Yeah. Double bonus hack.
So if this gets totally ripped apart where you can't even do the tearing off the head thing, you can actually rig it from this tail, the tailless tail section as well. I've actually got over slot snook with this, and same thing, right? Jig head, rig it up through the tail. You have to be a little bit, let me get it here close to me.
The poor man's paddle tail.
Yeah, this is the reverse Nub Rig, I guess it'll be the term for it. But yeah, rig this puppy up. And as long as it's rigged properly, right, as long as it's straight, it actually looks pretty darn good.
It does look
right?
good.
So it actually has shockingly good motion in the water, and this thing bounces on the bottom. It has really good little darts. And so that is a lot of fish per lure is what these little hacks will result in. And in many cases, the biggest fish, because this little guy, there's very little wind resistance, and this puppy launches. And so again, shockingly good, and something that I totally could have caught way more fish per lure if I did this years ago. So wanted to share that with you.
That's awesome. All right, that's number 2. Number 3, this is the one Luke talked about, could be a little bit contentious. Mono versus fluoro, right? Mono's been around forever. You know, anti-mono is what we grew up on. I remember having to, tire first, line the leader knots, and figuring this whole thing out down in Marco. And that's when we first started catching snook and realizing we needed some pretty heavy leader. And then Fluoro came out. I don't remember what year that, Fluoro's been around, but when it got big and they started marketing it real hard. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the anglers were like, oh man, we need Fluoro. It's invisible, which is not. And it's more like, all this abrasion stuff, and it's stronger. And like, we heard all these things that we've, for the most part, have proved wrong on some independent tests, because we don't care either way. Like, we just want to maximize our money and get as many fish as possible. And so now we've kind of gone back, right? So we went all in on Fluoro, like it's the best because we just believe what we heard out there. And then we started testing it. And we're like, man, it's really not that good. Why are we paying all this extra money? And now, like, you rarely use Fluoro, if ever. So kind of tell the whole story on why you believe that you might not need that expensive Fluoro, especially the Fluoro leader line.
Yeah, I mean, as anglers, we're always looking for the edge. Nobody wants to be the person to come back to the dock empty-handed. And so we hear about something that just, oh man, this thing's going to help us catch more fish, so we just do it, and without actually testing it, just trusting the marketing material. And so after actually testing for many years, I was totally bought into the fluorocarbon hype. I truly thought, I knew it wasn't invisible, but I truly thought it was less visible. I truly thought that it was better at handling abrasion relative to just regular monofilament. And I also thought it had a better knot strength relative to monofilament. And what I found after testing is that a lot of those attributes are not only sometimes aren't true, they're the exact opposite, especially with abrasion, which is one of my biggest factors. I do a lot of snook fishing, and they are really good at rubbing through leader with their rough mouths, and their strong fish rough mouth combination is bad on line. And I've done some tests on mono versus fluoro, and like, again, these just regular Andy spools of mono, and really every other mono. Strin, Berkeley Big Game, we're not sponsored by we don't accept any sponsorships from any line, lure, rod manufacturers. We're only sponsored by Insider Club members, so we can give you the true opinions without any outside influence. Regular mono, every single time I've tested it, outlast the way more expensive fluorocarbon on abrasion test. It's not even close. Obviously, fluorocarbon, what you might be thinking is like, hey, fluorocarbon is thinner relative to mono for each line class. Yes, that is true. And so I've tested 15-pound Andy against 20-pound and even more in some cases fluorocarbon to make sure that the diameters were equal, and the mono will still absolutely wreck and outperform fluorocarbon. I then heard, hey, that's not true because the lines need to be soaked in water. Monofilament absorbs water. Fluorocarbon doesn't absorb water. So once the lines are wet, the mono is going to be worse than the fluorocarbon. So I tested it out. I soaked lines for 8 days. I kept it totally submerged. I ran the test, and mono actually did better relative to fluorocarbon after it was soaked. So every time I've tested it, monofilament is one. So for that reason, I started doing kind of some tests. Like, it's hard to test what fish see. And so I would just have one rod with mono, another one with fluorocarbon, and kind of switch around. I haven't been able to tell a difference. And then the last year and a half, I've done just straight mono, no fluorocarbon at all. And I haven't seen a decline in fish catching, even when going down to the Keys, like with clear water. So it might make a difference for super, super, super clear water with very finicky fish. But for most of us who are fishing water that's not gin clear, it probably, at least it hasn't made a noticeable difference for me. What is noticeable is the price difference.
Yeah.
So this is a cost per yard, right? This is a 50-yard spool of just regular mono. This is Andy mono, and it's like $5. And then to get a 25-yard spool of some of the more popular and I guess more the lines with a lot of notoriety, like Cigar Blue Label is one that I've done a lot of testing on. 25-yard spool is like $20. So you get less line for 4 times more of the money. So it's actually half the amount of line, 4 times more of the money. That's, per quick brain calculation, that's 8 times savings by simply going mono. And to even save more, right? 50-yard spool versus a 600-yard spool, the line seems to be the same either way. This is just more convenient. So like lately, I've just been taking my leaders out of this big old 600-yard spool of Andy, which costs like $8 or something crazy. And maybe it was 12. Either way, the cost per yard is like nothing. And I mean, I've been catching, like I caught that giant snook when I had Otis on the boat, caught overslot redfish, and then like a 32-inch snook that had me way up under a dock, and somehow got it out. Line didn't break, dog Otis didn't fall in, and like now I'm totally sold. Like, hey, I might as well just save even more money by going book spool.
Yep. And just to be completely transparent, we make more money when you buy Fluoro. That I believe that's a big reason it's getting pushed so much. There's so much more spread there, right? There's so much more money to be made, and yet we're telling you to buy mono. So I mean, we're just telling it like it is. We're personally, Luke and I, look at our orders at our own store. I mean, we're buying Andy mono. We sell both. Like it doesn't matter to us what you buy. Like I said, we make more money if you want to buy the Fluoro stuff, but you don't need it, which is why this is part of the hack. You will save money, and I don't think you're going to notice any change in fish catching, and it might even help you out. Certainly going to help out your wallet.
It'll definitely help you out. It'll definitely help you out if you get a fish that gets you in the structure. The monofilament is undoubtedly better at handling abrasion.
Yep, proven fact check.
It's
all
fact.
Right. Next one, shrimp. So now we're going to talk about some live bait stuff. And we were down in the Keys. This is now a few years ago, and it was kind of the beginning of what is it really been kind of a shrimp shortage. And there's now more anglers than ever. It's been tougher to get shrimp. And if you're into catching fish, saltwater inshore, fish using shrimp, like you got to be the first person at some of these marinas and tackle stores. They run out quick. And for these guys, that's a big deal, right? I mean, they're making their living with shrimp. And so we were out with Captain Hollywood, one of our coaches down in the Keys, and he would tell us about kind of their experience with it. He's like, man, I got 5 boats. He's like, so I got to be buying a lot of shrimp, and they were literally couldn't supply us with enough. So we started going with frozen shrimp, old school frozen shrimp. And he's like, I was worried to death that we were going to catch as many fish. And he's like, it didn't change anything. And he's like, now I'm saving, thousands of dollars a year for him, and he's got a whole fleet. I mean, it literally turns into maybe even $10,000 a year of savings just by going frozen, and he hasn't noticed any change at all. I still would prefer if someone was going to give me, a bucket of live shrimp or frozen, I personally take the live. But in terms of a hack and basically saying you don't have to have it, that was eye-opening. We did it. Remember that was the day we went out with just jig heads and frozen shrimp, and we caught a ton of fish. Of course, Slam Shady kept up with them as well. But you did not need to have live shrimp to catch a ton of fish.
Yeah, and a lot of times the toughest part about live bait is just keeping it alive. You have the aerators running, and you just have to check the water and just make sure it's just a little bit more upkeep. And so if you do live bait, it just takes a more time and energy to do it. And it's just so much simpler just to get a bag of frozen shrimp, throw it in the cooler, and then if you need it, right, if for whatever reason you're having a tough day and just things aren't happening and you really want to go back to just a time-tested method of just soaking some shrimp on the bottom near some hard structure, you can now do that without having to worry about stopping by the bait shop in the morning. Just go out, like Hollywood just has all these bags of shrimp in his freezer, and when he's going out, right, he'll just throw some in the cooler, and then if he uses them, great. If not, they go back in the cooler, in the freezer. So super effective. Obviously, live shrimp will stay on the hook longer, but the frozen stuff it's really not nearly as worse off than the live bait as I thought. Because we went out, we were catching snook, we jumped a tarpon, we caught redfish. Obviously, we got catfish. You're going to catch catfish when using
Oh,
live shrimp, but you can catch the great fish too. And it really was eye opening to see how effective the frozen shrimp can be.
yep. And speaking of shrimp, we're going to number 5, another shrimp one. This is the final one here, is the old Weedless Shrimp Rig. And so many people get all this hardware and all this fancy stuff to catch fish with shrimp, live or frozen. And Luke, you were the one that taught me this. Was the first time we went and we were fishing bridges. Like, man, like that's the cheapest hook I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And we were slaying, and we were catching snapper and big sheep's head. And what is it? This is probably the most affordable. I'm not going to call it cheap. It's affordable. Talk about what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of cheap. We're not going to say that it's amazing, but it is definitely the most affordable rig
It works
that you can get. So that what this is, for those watching, this is a traditional bullet weight, like for bass fishing, and then just have that on the leader, and then have just a normal J hook, nothing fancy. Sometimes hooks can get really expensive just for a hook, right? It's
and that's basically an eagle claw bass or freshwater hook, right?
Yeah, it's freshwater. Yeah, here's the packet for it. So eagle claw, plain shank. You can find them at your local Walmart. We have them on our tackle store as well because they just flat out work. But it's for 10 hooks, it's like maybe $2 or something like that. And for a lot of these higher end like octopus hooks, I mean, you can spend $5 for 5. Right? I mean, like literally like $1 a piece or approaching $1 a piece, and I mean it's a hook, right? And so with this little rig, I've caught tons of overslot reds. I've got upper slots, snook. And it holds up. Yes, it will rust faster. So it's not, I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's the best hook ever. I'm just saying that it gets the job done. And as far as using shrimp, the best way that I found to do it is to rig them weedless. Most of the action happens right next to hard structure. And so if you can get next to hard structure without getting snagged, you're gonna have more fish and less frustration. So that's really what this solves. And just to show how it rigs, I have an old power prawn, one of our test power prawns here. So I'm gonna rip the tail off.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. So
going back to tip number 2, it's still a little nub.
Yeah. So this is a nub rig. And if I really want to do like a shrimp motion, I can put the jig head, rig it on here backwards. And now this is like a fleeing shrimp. So, but bonus ag. So as far as rigging it weedless, pretend this is an actual shrimp. So go in with the hook straight through the tail. Right.
So if you're listening, he ripped the tail off.
Yeah, rip the tail off, and I'm going through the meat, and I'm aiming out down towards the feet side of the shrimp, right? The bottom side of the shrimp, and just go in about a 1/4 inch or so, and then we're going to thread that hook all the way up.
So the shank goes all the way through.
Yep. And now we're going to twist the hook around so that the hook point is now pointing towards the belly of the shrimp. And I'll flip it over just because it's easier. And I'm going to go and dig that hook in so that it is now buried. You can probably actually barely see it. It's buried right underneath the shell. So the hook point is inside the shrimp, right under the shell of the shrimp. And now we have a weedless rig. This weight is a bullet weight. It's not going to get snagged on anything. You can get right down there in the hard structure. The weight's not going to get snagged. The hook point is inside. It's protected by the shell of the shrimp. That's not going to get snagged. You can rub this through some gnarly structure on the bottom, not get snagged, and then that's where those bigger fish are usually hiding, and they're going to come by and pick it up, and now it's game on. And it's shockingly effective. Most importantly, it's super affordable because it's like a 10-pack of weights is like a $2 or so. 10-pack of hooks is like another $2 or $3. And so for all of the hooks and weights you need for multiple days of fishing is less than 1 pack of like normal hooks that are for whatever reason marked up so high. I don't know. I don't understand why a hook can cost 75 cents a pop.
That's crazy.
Unless they're magical or something and bring fish to themselves. But anyhow, so that's just this has been a game changer for like sheep's head fishing, mangrove snapper fishing inshore. This is a really, really good setup.
Yeah, we caught nice grouper. I mean, it's surprising what that thing will move. And even though it's weedless, right? If you're fishing bridges and areas of structural rocks and you got current, which you should want some current if you're fishing those areas, you will lose some, right? We've been hung up and just where it just gets stuck so far back or a bigger fish takes you down. It's a whole lot better when you lose your rig to lose that versus your dollar hook and your super expensive weights. you know.
Yeah, or even jig heads, or like a lot of people use
Yeah.
jig heads, and that if it works too, right? You can put that shrimp on a jig head just as well. But when you list that jig head, those are in many cases $2 or more a pop.
Yep.
It just adds up. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. This is just it's rare that the most effective way is the most affordable. And so this so far has been the most effective way that I found. That's more of an opinion, a personal opinion, but I think it's a statement of fact to say that's the most affordable. That one's going to be very hard to argue because it's just so inexpensive, but shockingly good. So if you are one that likes to use a lot of shrimp, this would be like a must-have addition to the arsenal because it flat out works and it saves money.
Save that little rig. I want to fish with it next time I'm over there. The thing looks good.
You got it.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's 5. Hope you enjoyed this. This is just one of many things that we do for our Insider Club every single week, all year long. And, so if you're listening to this is our free stuff. We put a lot of our just good tips out there for the public. We reserved our best stuff, and we reserved all of our trends and all of our smart fishing spots, and where we're actually fishing every single week, Monday through Friday. We literally go fish a new spot and post the whole thing for our members. And it's not about selling spots, right? I think some people get confused, like, oh man, Salt Strong is just selling spots. No, like GPS spots are great, but that's not the answer, right? That we used to think that forever. The answer is you got to understand the trends. You got to understand the fish's biology and why those fish are going to be in those spots at specific times, tides, time of year, etc. We talk about it on these webinars we do, right? Fish have tails and no fences, right? They're not just sitting there in one spot all the time, not moving. They're moving all the time, certainly seasonally. And so that is our whole mission at Salt Strong, is to help you get everything you need, have all the knowledge and the intel so that you have confidence every time you hit the water to know exactly where those feeding fish will be. And I love it. Watching the community, we're getting a lot of new members. We get, 50 plus new members a day, and they're coming in there saying, man, I just had my best day ever, or I was doing it all wrong. Thank you, Salt Strong. I finally get it. And this is really good for busy people, right? I think there's a misconception too, is, oh man, I'm too busy to watch all this stuff. You don't have to. We have it all there for the people who do want to watch it. But the majority of our members, they're busy. They have jobs and families and stuff going on, and they don't have time to sit there and watch 5-hour videos, right? No one wants to sit through YouTube videos all day long. You want stuff short and sweet. So we try to do it in 10 minutes or less. So we say, if you have at least 10 minutes, if you don't have 10 minutes, you shouldn't be fishing. But 10 minutes, you can do it on the way to the ramp or wherever you're going. And if you just listen/watch the 10-minute smart fishing game plan every Friday morning, you will know more about where to find the fish, and you will have a better idea about spot selection than 99% of all the anglers out there. The only people that might know more is full-time guides, because they're on the water every day. And that's really what we're doing, is taking all the intel that our guides give us, that all of our audience gives us, that all of our members give us, that all of our fishing coaches give us, and curate it into 10 minutes or less, and literally show you and tell you the exact types of spot, depth, etc., rigs you should be using to catch fish that weekend. Do it every weekend, and it flat out works. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's like the Cliff Notes for fishing is basically what it is. It's just, I know we're all busy, right? Especially once kids starting to come in the equation. It's not like back in the high school, college days, we can go out and fish all day long. And then if we don't catch anything, oh, well, right. As time is everything. And so this is all about just maximize your time, getting out there, and every minute of your time in the water needs to be as effective as possible. And that's really the whole premise of the club. And that's really what it delivers for you.
Yep. So if you haven't joined, go to saltstrong.com. You'll see a little button at the top where you can go to saltstrong.com/pricing and see our latest and greatest deal to get in the club. And it's risk-free. We have a 200% money back guarantee now. And that means if you stay in for 300 days, like, give it a shot. You have nothing to lose. You can always get your money back. But if you stay 300 days and you don't feel like it was worth your time, or we wasted your time, we'll actually double your money back. Like, that's how confident we are to work for you. Because what we found is most people who get in, they come in annual, because the annual is such a good deal. It's down to basically 27 cents a day, or what, $1.87 a week. It's nothing in the big scheme of things. and versus going monthly. Why pay extra when you don't have to? And they get in and like, holy smokes, this stuff's awesome. And I'm saving money on my tackle and I'm finding fish faster. And people just keep renewing year after year after year. And Luke and I mean, we're all members. We get the same tackle discounts. We're all learning together. It's a really, really neat club. So those of you who are members, thank you guys so much. I know some of our members like to listen on the podcast as well. Thank you guys. Love seeing the comments and just love seeing all the interaction in the community. It's really, really fun. It's become a family to Luke and I. And I mean, we just pinch ourselves that we get to do this. So much fun with just really great people. So thank you guys so much.
Yep. Yeah. And we have that in the private community. So a lot of meetups are starting to get scheduled. I've been just having a blast meeting new members. My goal is to really travel across the entire Southeast and fish every mile of shoreline. Slowly, hitching away at it. And we organize a ton of meetups all throughout the Southeast, and I'll be doing them. Obviously, members are doing it by themselves, and it's been really cool just to see members just meeting other great people who just love fishing and just enjoy hanging out with others who do as well.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll track it by how long your hair gets as you go from state to state. All right, Luke must be in South Carolina now. His hair's growing half an inch.
Yeah, I had some mullet comments that I saw. So yes, this is a mullet, and yes, it does help catch fish. So.
You know, I had a Bama Beach Bum on, and we're talking about YouTube comments he gets, and his hair is longer than yours now, and he's like, man, he goes, it's so funny. He's like, all my comments went from being funny and about abusing fish to my hair. He's like, I've never seen so many grown men be that concerned with my long hair.
I will second it. I am shocked at how many hair comments there are. Keep them coming. I love it.
I mean, you're doing something right. All right, guys, appreciate you. We will talk to you on the next episode. And like always, we put all of these on the fishing tip section at saltwater.com, and underneath the actual video and the little area where you can listen to the podcast, there's an area to leave a comment. Leave us a comment. If there's another hack that you found is great, we love to hear about your hacks and things that you found that have saved you some money. These are just 5 that we're using on a day-to-day basis, and we preach to our Insider Club members. And we have a whole lot more. Probably do a follow-up video on this one as well. We probably could have done one just on shrimp alone. But it's fun to talk about these hacks. Love saving money. Love saving you time. And hope to see you in the club if you're not there already. Peace. We out. Whoop, whoop.